What does it feel like to have everything and yet feel absolutely nothing? For Evelyn Thorne, the answer was found on a small yellow sticky note, taped to a cardboard box. It was the first genuine kindness she'd received in years, and the man who wrote it had no idea he was about to be offered $10 million. Evelyn Thorne was that isolated billionaire's wife. For years, her only human interactions were transactional, until a delivery driver named Marcus began leaving handwritten notes on every package. "Have a great day. You've got this." Simple, sincere words that became the only light in her gilded cage. But when she finally tracked down the source of this kindness, she didn't just want to say thank you. She presented a contract. And the terms would test the very nature of the compassion that brought them together. Marcus Williams started his route every morning at 4 a.m. His world was a grid of suburban streets, 150 stops a day, a relentless race against the clock. He drove a 10-year-old van with a persistent rattle in the rear axle, fighting for every tip and 5-star rating in an algorithm that treated him as a number. But Marcus had a secret weapon, a pack of yellow sticky notes and a blue pen. For 2 years, he'd written a personal message on every single package he delivered. "Hope this finds you well, sending good vibes your way." It began as a simple strategy to stand out, to maybe earn an extra dollar, but it became something else, a tiny rebellion against the impersonal grind, a way to remind himself he was still a person, connecting with other people. He lived in a 1-bedroom apartment in a complex where the rent had jumped 3 times in 18 months. His dream was to open a small community print shop, a place where local artists and small businesses could afford to make beautiful things. He had the business plan scrawled in a worn notebook. He had the location picked out. All he needed was $85,000, an impossible sum. So he drove and he wrote notes, and he saved every extra dollar in a jar labeled "the shop." Across town, in a gated community known as the Oaks, Evelyn Thorne moved through 18,000 square feet of silent perfection. Her husband, Robert, was a venture capitalist whose life was a series of flights, deals, and boardrooms. Their marriage had become a quarterly performance review, their conversations limited to logistics and public appearances. Evelyn had everything money could buy, and a profound clinical loneliness that no designer could cure. Therapists called it affluent isolation. The reality was simpler. She was drowning in a sea of everything, and no one could see it. Her days blurred into a meaningless loop. Staff handled everything. The house manager, the chef, the landscapers. They were polite, efficient, and utterly distant. Her attempts at friendship with other spouses in the Oaks felt like corporate networking. Conversations were veneers, carefully avoiding anything real. A study from the Harvard Business Review found that over half of CEOs and their spouses report severe loneliness. For Evelyn, the statistic was a daily truth. Her only unpredictable human contact was the delivery driver. And then, one Tuesday, she found the first note. It was on a box containing linen sheets. The handwriting was neat, blocky. "These look cozy, hope you have a restful night." She stared at it. It wasn't a branded marketing message. It was personal. For a week, she said nothing. Then another note appeared. "Whatever you're tackling today, you can handle it." She found herself saving them, peeling them off the cardboard and placing them on the marble countertop in her vast, unused kitchen. They were the only words addressed to her asterisk, not to Mrs. Thorne, not to the billionaire's wife, in months. She began to wait for the brown van. She'd watch from an upstairs window as the cheerful, overworked man in the uniform cap bounded up her winding driveway. Her heart would lift at the sight of the small yellow square on her package. The notes became her anchor. "Don't forget to smile today. You matter." One rainy Thursday, the note read, "Tough weather out there. Hope you're staying warm and dry inside." She was inside, of course. She was always inside, but he didn't know that. He thought he was writing to someone who had a day to face, challenges to meet. The kindness was based on a fiction, and that somehow made it more precious. Marcus, meanwhile, had no idea. The mansion on Ridgeview Drive was just another stop, albeit a long driveway. He saw the grand windows, the manicured hedges, and thought nothing of it. He was focused on his van's troubling new noise, on his mother's medical bills, on the ever-shrinking number in his shop jar after another rent hike. The notes were his discipline, his tiny broadcast of humanity into the void. He never expected a response. Evelyn's obsession grew. She used her husband's neglected security system logs to pinpoint delivery times. She learned the driver's name from a parcel label, M. Williams. She Googled him. It wasn't hard. Marcus Williams, age 28, a local community college graduate, no criminal record, a few old social media posts about graphic design. She stared at his photo, a smiling man with gentle eyes, and felt a surge of something akin to panic. This was the source of the only warmth in her life, and he was a complete stranger, living a reality she could scarcely imagine. The turning point was a note that simply said, "Keep going." It arrived on the anniversary of her father's death, a day of quiet, suffocating grief her husband had forgotten. That was the moment Evelyn Thorne decided she couldn't just be a passive recipient. She needed to see him, to thank him, to do something. But here's the thing about extreme wealth. It doesn't just buy things, it buys solutions. And Evelyn's solution was not a thank you card. She had her husband's corporate attorney draft a document, not a gift, but a proposal, a one-year contract for personal services. The terms were staggering. Marcus would cease all other employment. He would be provided a vehicle and a generous monthly stipend. His sole duty, to continue writing and delivering personalized, handwritten notes and messages to Evelyn Thorne, and to engage in regular, genuine conversation with her for no less than 5 hours per week. The compensation upon successful completion of the one-year term, $10 million. It was insane. It was predatory. It was, to Evelyn's isolated mind, the only way to guarantee the continuation of the one thing that made her feel alive. She wasn't buying him. She was buying his kindness, institutionalizing it. She had the contract placed in a crisp, legal envelope. On the day of his next delivery, she didn't hide. She waited at the door. Marcus, running 15 minutes behind schedule, saw the woman standing in the grand doorway. He'd never seen a customer wait outside before. He pasted on his professional smile, grabbed the package and his pen, and scribbled his standard note. "Here's your delivery. Have a wonderful day." He jogged up the steps. "Afternoon, ma'am. Just need you to sign here." Evelyn took the tablet, her hand trembling slightly. She signed. Then she held out the thick, cream-colored envelope. "This is for you, Marcus." He blinked, thinking it was some kind of customer complaint or a return label. Thank you." He took it, stuffing it into his bag to deal with later. He had 100 more stops. "No," she said, her voice firmer than she intended. "Please, open it now." Puzzled, his schedule ticking in his head, Marcus tore open the envelope. He scanned the first page, then the second. His professional smile vanished. His face went blank with pure, uncomprehending shock. He looked from the paper to the elegant, anxious woman in the silk robe, and then back to the paper. The number $10 million swam before his eyes. The clauses about emotional engagement and contractual kindness felt like a physical blow. He finally found his voice, but it was what Evelyn expected. It was low, cold, and laced with a fury born of profound humiliation. "What," he said, slowly crumpling the edge of the contract, "is this?" The silence on the marble portico was absolute, broken only by the distant hum of a lawnmower. Marcus stared at the crumpled contract, then at Evelyn, his expression shifting from shock to a hardening anger. "You think my kindness is for sale?" His voice was tight. "You think you can put a $10 million price tag on a have a nice day? This isn't a thank you. This is an insult." Evelyn flinched, the raw rejection hitting her like a slap. "No, that's not." "What is it then?" He thrust the papers toward her. "Personal services, contractual conversation. I'm a delivery driver, not a rented friend." The word friend hung in the air, pathetic and exposed. "I write those notes for everyone. It's not special, it's just what I do." "But it was asterisk special," Evelyn pleaded, her carefully composed facade cracking. "To me, it was the only thing that felt real. For 2 years, Marcus, 2 years of notes. You have no idea what that meant." Of course I don't, Marcus exploded, his professional composure gone. You're a name on a manifest, a long driveway. I spend 12 hours a day being ignored, yelled at by people running late, fighting a system that wants to replace me with a robot. The notes, they're my line in the sand. They're so I don't become the robot. And you want to turn asterisk that into a job description. He shook his head, a bitter laugh escaping. $10 million. Do you even know what that number does to someone like me? It doesn't fix a problem. It becomes the only problem. He turned and walked back to his van, throwing the contract onto the passenger seat. Evelyn stood frozen in the doorway, watching him go, the crushing weight of her miscalculation settling in. She had tried to capture a butterfly with a bank vault, and she had crushed it. Marcus drove for 5 blocks before he had to pull over, his hands shaking on the wheel. He grabbed the contract, smoothing it out, reading the cold, precise legalese. Party A shall provide empathetic engagement. Party B shall compensate for emotional labor. It was a violation. Yet his eyes snagged on the number, 10 million. It was a number that could erase his mother's debt. That could build the print shop twice over. That could change everything for his little sister. The moral outrage warred with a desperate, pragmatic voice. What was 1 year? 1 year of swallowing his pride, of performing kindness, for a lifetime of security. He thought of Evelyn's face, not haughty or entitled, but terrified. Lonely in a way he recognized, even if its container was a mansion. He'd seen that look before on his mother's face after his father left. A different kind of poverty. He drove the rest of his route in a daze, the notes he wrote feeling hollow, performative. The magic was broken. Back at the mansion, Evelyn retreated to her solarium, the room filled with expensive, joyless orchids. She called the only person she could think of, her older sister, Claire, who lived in Oregon and had long ago opted out of the Thorn universe. "Evie, breathe. What did you do?" Claire asked after hearing the frantic summary. "I offered him a contract, to be kind to me, for money." A long sigh traveled down the line. "Oh, honey, you can't outsource a soul." "It wasn't like that. I was trying to make it permanent, safe." "Kindness isn't safe," Claire said softly. "It's risky by definition. That's what makes it real. You tried to buy a guarantee and you turned a beautiful, accidental gift into a transaction. You need to fix this. Not with more money, with an apology, a real one." Evelyn knew she was right, but the shame felt paralyzing. Marcus, meanwhile, faced his own counsel. That evening, over a meal of discounted frozen pizza, he told his mother and his sister Zoe about the offer. His mother, Gloria, put her head in her hands. "Dios mío, Marcus, this is a devil's bargain." "But 10 million, 17-year-old Zoe whispered, her eyes wide. "That's college for both of us. That's you not breaking your back anymore." "It's selling my soul," Marcus countered, but his conviction wavered. "No," Gloria said, looking up, her eyes tired but sharp. "It is selling your asterisk heart asterisk. The notes come from here." She tapped her chest. "You put that in a contract, it becomes a trick, a lie you tell for money. What happens to you after a year of telling that lie? The money stays. What happens to Marcus?" The question hung in the small, warm kitchen. Marcus had no answer. 2 days passed. Evelyn didn't order anything, but Marcus had a routine package for her neighbor. As he pulled up, he saw her sitting on a stone bench in the garden, wearing simple jeans and a sweater, looking smaller than she had in the silk robe. She saw him and stood, walking toward the fence line before he could retreat. "Marcus," she called out, her voice clear but unsure. "Please, 2 minutes." He hesitated, then walked over, keeping the wrought iron fence between them. A symbolic barrier they both felt. "I am so sorry," she began, the words rushing out. "The contract was. It was the only language I know how to speak. It's the language of my world. Acquire, secure, contract, control. I wanted to control the one thing that made me happy because I control nothing else. Not my time, not my friendships, not even my own schedule. I treated your generosity like a commodity, and I am deeply, truly ashamed." Marcus leaned against his van, arms crossed, listening. The raw honesty disarmed him. "My husband is a good man," she continued, "but he is married to his work. I am a fixture, a beautiful, quiet fixture in a beautiful, quiet house. The loneliness, therapists have a name for it. Affluent isolation. It sounds like a luxury problem. It feels like a terminal illness. Your notes were the first medicine that worked. Not because they were profound, but because they were free, and I tried to put them in a cage." She took a shaky breath. "I am withdrawing the offer. The contract is void, but I am asking you as one human being to another if you would be willing to talk to me sometime, not as a client, not as an employee, as a person who seems to understand that a few words on a sticky note can be a lifeline. No money, no obligation, just conversation." Marcus studied her. The wealth was still there in the perfect cut of her sweater in the estate behind her. But the person in front of him was stripped bare, pleading from a place of genuine poverty. He thought of his mother's words, selling his heart. This wasn't a sale. This was a request for a donation. "I don't know," he said finally. "I need to think what you did. It messed with my head. It made the notes feel cheap. I need that back for me." Evelyn nodded, tears in her eyes. "I understand. However you decide, thank you for listening." He completed his delivery and left, but her apology echoed. It didn't erase the offer, but it changed its shape. It was no longer a billionaire's whimsy. It was the flailing act of a drowning person. That weekend, Marcus's van finally gave out. The rear axle noise became a catastrophic groan, leaving him stranded with a $3,000 repair estimate. The shop jar held $800. The rent was due. The math was brutal and inescapable. The $10 million, the revoked offer, now glowed in his mind like a forbidden, taunting neon sign. In a moment of pure desperation, he did something he never imagined. He found the contract in his glove compartment, smoothed it out, and took a picture of the signature page. He found Evelyn Thorne's email address through a public charity board listing. He attached the photo. The body of the email contained only one sentence: "Is the offer still void?" The reply came in 20 minutes. "The offer as written is void. The need is not. Come tomorrow at 4 p.m. We will talk." The next day, Marcus stood again at the mansion, but this time he was ushered inside by a silent house manager. The interior was as magnificent and cold as he'd imagined, a museum of success. Evelyn waited in a cozy library, a room that seemed slightly more lived in. "Thank you for coming," she said. "You said we'd talk. So talk," Marcus said, not unkindly but with no pretense. "What's the real deal here? Your husband know you're trying to hire a friend." A shadow crossed her face. "Robert is aware I have been struggling. He approves of any solution that is discreet and doesn't interfere with his obligations. A contractual arrangement to him would be a sensible business solution. A messy human friendship would not." "So I'd be a business solution," Marcus said, the bitterness returning. "You were asterisk a business solution in my first terrible attempt," Evelyn corrected. "Now I am proposing something messier and harder. I am asking for help, and I am prepared to help you in return in a way that doesn't put a price on your soul." She slid a single sheet of paper across the table. It was not a contract. It was a proposal for a private, interest-free loan. The amount was $85,000, the exact figure from his shop jar dream. The repayment terms were flexible, based on his future business revenue. "My research wasn't all creepy," she said, a faint smile touching her lips. "I read an old blog post about a community print shop. It was beautiful. This is a loan, Marcus, for a business. You pay it back when you can. The collateral is your dream." Marcus felt the air leave his lungs. This was different. This wasn't payment for kindness. It was an investment in his future. It recognized his ambition, not just his empathy. It was, in its own way, a form of respect. "And in return," he asked, his voice hoarse, "in return, you give me some of your time once a week. We talk. You tell me about your route, your mother, your sister, your plans for the shop. I will tell you about my world, which is both privileged and empty. You can be brutally honest. You can tell me when I'm being insufferable. You can say no to anything that feels wrong. The only rule is that we both show up as real people, no performances. It was a staggering gamble. For her, to be truly seen by someone from a world she knew nothing about. For him, to accept a colossal loan from a woman whose first instinct was to write a contract for companionship. What if it doesn't work? What if we hate each other? Marcus asked. Then the loan still stands, because I believe in the shop, and we part ways with a lesson learned. The risk is mine. Marcus looked around the library at the lifetimes of knowledge on the shelves, at the woman who had everything and nothing. He thought of his broken van, his mother's tired eyes, the dream that felt perpetually out of reach. This was not selling his heart. This was a bridge, fragile and strange, between two unimaginably different lives. It was terrifying. It was the most human offer he'd received in years. "Okay," he said, the word feeling enormous. "We try it." The first session was the following Tuesday. It was awkward, filled with long silences and stilted exchanges. Marcus talked about the logistics company's new impossible metrics. Evelyn talked about the suffocating pressure of a charity gala. It felt like two diplomats from hostile nations. But then Marcus, frustrated, said, "Why do you even go to that gala if you hate it?" And Evelyn, stunned by the directness, answered truthfully for the first time. "Because if I stop, I disappear. My entire identity is Robert Thorne's wife. The galas, the boards, they're the proof that I exist." Marcus nodded slowly. "I get that. My uniform is my proof. No one sees me without it." That moment of shared invisibility was the first crack in the wall. The second session was easier. The third, Evelyn asked to see his design portfolio for the shop. He showed her on his cracked phone screen. She made a technical suggestion about print resolution that was surprisingly astute. "I studied art history," she said, shrugging. "Before." Week by week, the strange alliance grew. Marcus learned that Evelyn's loneliness was engineered, a byproduct of a marriage that functioned as a corporate merger, of friends who were allies or competitors, of a social structure designed to prevent genuine vulnerability. Evelyn learned that Marcus's kindness was born of resilience, a deliberate choice to create light in a system designed to grind him down. They weren't friends, not yet. But they were becoming allies in a shared fight against different kinds of dehumanization. Then, 6 weeks in, the outside world crashed in. Robert Thorne came home early from a business trip. He found his wife and a delivery driver having coffee in the library, laughing over a story about Marcus's sister Zoe's disastrous driving test. The temperature in the room dropped 20 degrees. "Evelyn," Robert said, his voice calm, polished, and utterly cold, "a word in my study." The door closed. Marcus, sitting alone, could hear the low, furious murmur of Robert's voice, though not the words. A few minutes later, Evelyn emerged, pale but composed. "I think you should go, Marcus. We'll talk next week." But as Marcus drove away, he knew the fragile experiment was under threat. Robert Thorne had seen something he couldn't categorize, couldn't control. And in that man's world, what couldn't be controlled was a risk to be eliminated. The gilded cage had a warden, and he was now on alert. Robert Thorne's investigation began not with a shout, but with a series of quiet, precise phone calls. By the next morning, he knew everything. Marcus Williams's employment record, his financial situation, the outstanding loan from Evelyn, the details of their weekly meetings. Robert saw not a human connection, but a vector of risk, a liability, a potential scandal. His response was not emotional, it was operational. He summoned Evelyn to his home office, a room of dark wood and silent screens. "This ends today," he said without preamble. "The loan is a minor issue. The relationship is not. You have formed an attachment to a service employee. It is inappropriate and it exposes us." "He's not a service employee, Robert," Evelyn said, her voice steady for the first time in years. "He's a person I speak to, that's all." "That is not all," Robert countered, tapping a folder on his desk. "He is a person with significant debt, a struggling family, and now a direct financial link to you. In the eyes of the world, and more importantly, to my investors and board, this looks like either a pathetic indiscretion or a shakedown in progress. Neither is acceptable." Evelyn felt a cold dread. "What are you going to do?" "The loan will be called immediately. A standard clause. I've had legal review it. He has 72 hours to repay the full $85,000 or we file. That severs the financial tie cleanly." He paused. "As for the conversations, you will send a text today terminating the arrangement. You will cite your husband's concerns. It provides a narrative of marital correction. It's clean." "You can't do that," Evelyn whispered, horrified. "I already have. The notice is being drafted." Robert's gaze was implacable. "Evelyn, I have spent 30 years building a reputation on stability, control, and predictable alliances. This is an unpredictable variable. It must be removed. This is not a punishment. It is protection. For you, for me, for the life we have." The life we have. The words echoed in the sterile room. A life she now realized was a beautifully appointed prison, where even genuine human contact was deemed a security threat. Across town, Marcus received the email from Robert Thorne's legal firm as he was loading his newly repaired van. The subject line: "Demand for immediate repayment of promissory note." The body was a block of legal text, but the meaning was clear: pay everything back in 3 days, or face legal action that would ruin his credit and any hope of future loans. His stomach dropped. This was the warden's move. This was how the cage defended itself. He called Evelyn. It went straight to voicemail. He texted, "Got a legal letter. What's happening?" No reply. An hour later, a second message arrived, this time from Evelyn's number. But the tone was all wrong. Formal, distant. "Marcus, after consideration and discussion, I must terminate our weekly meetings. My husband has expressed valid concerns about the nature of our association. I wish you the best with your business endeavors. Please direct all communication regarding the loan to the legal office, details attached." It was a dismissal written by committee. Marcus felt a surge of betrayal, hot and sharp. Then, underneath it, a colder understanding. This wasn't Evelyn. This was the system she lived in, speaking through her. The bridge was being bombed from the far side. But Robert Thorne had made a critical miscalculation. He assumed Marcus was a passive variable, a man who would be crushed by legal pressure and slink away. He didn't account for the resilience forged by 100 small daily battles, or for Marcus's sister, Zoe. Zoe, a digital native, saw the cold, corporate email and flew into a rage. "They think they can just delete you," she said. Before Marcus could stop her, she took to a private online community of artists and gig workers, a place where she'd often bragged about her brother's kindness. She told the whole story. The notes, the lonely woman, the first awful contract, the real apology, the loan for the shop, the genuine friendship. And now, the billionaire husband calling the loan to blow it all up. She didn't use last names, but the details were vivid. She ended with a question. "What's the price of a little human connection when you're that rich? Apparently, $85,000 and your dignity." The post did what it was meant to do. It resonated. It was screenshotted, shared, migrated to other platforms. The specifics were fuzzy enough to avoid libel, but the archetypal story was clear: wealth-crushing kindness. Algorithms, scenting engagement, did the rest. Within 48 hours, the story had a life of its own. A TikTok trend emerged. People filming themselves putting thank you notes on packages for delivery drivers, tagging it Noteback. A mid-tier business journalist, always on the hunt for a viral-adjacent story, dug deeper. Public property records, business filings, and Robert Thorne's high profile did the rest. The headline broke on a Wednesday morning. Venture capitalist's wife and the delivery driver, a story of loans, loneliness, and a contract for kindness. It stopped short of outright accusations but framed the loan recall as a ruthless power play. Robert Thorne's world valued privacy above all. Now, he was the subject of speculative, smirking commentary. His office was flooded with calls, not from investors, yet, but from reputation management firms and baffled associates. The predictable variable had exploded into a public relations brushfire. Robert was furious, but his anger was now laced with a new emotion: frustration. The situation was no longer a clean, legal severance. It was a messy, public narrative. He couldn't sue Marcus into silence without amplifying the story. He couldn't control the gossip. He confronted Evelyn, who had been silently crumbling under the forced isolation. "Your friend's family is courting public attention," he said coldly. "This ends now. You will make a statement. You will say the loan was a charitable impulse you reconsidered. The meetings were a mentorship that became uncomfortable. We will contain this." Evelyn looked at him, really looked at him, and saw not a protector but a man terrified of a stain on his perfect ledger. Something in her finally snapped. "No." "What?" "I will not lie about him or about me. You were right, Robert, it was a risk, but it was the first real thing I've done in a decade. You're asking me to call it a mistake to save face. I won't." "Evelyn, be rational. This is about our life." "Our life is a spreadsheet," she shouted, the pent-up emotion breaking through. "And he is not a liability. He is a person who was kind to me when no one else was. And I will not let you destroy him to maintain the illusion that everything here is perfect." The ensuing fight was volcanic. It was not about Marcus, not really. It was about the unspoken contract of their marriage, the emptiness, the years of curated silence. For the first time, Evelyn was not pleading from a place of loneliness, but fighting from a place of conviction. She had found something worth protecting, even if it was just the memory of an honest connection. The confrontation ended with Robert retreating to the city apartment, a strategic withdrawal. The mansion was suddenly, eerily quiet again, but Evelyn didn't feel the old loneliness. She felt clarity and fear. She had defied the system. She didn't know what would happen next. Marcus, meanwhile, was reeling from the sudden spotlight. Local news vans camped outside his apartment complex. His delivery company, citing distractions, placed him on unpaid administrative leave. The very thing he loved, his route, his quiet service, was taken from him. The loan was still due. The shop dream was now tangled in a public circus. Zoha was apologetic. "I just wanted them to feel some heat," she said, crying. "I didn't mean for this to happen." "It's not your fault," Marcus said, though he was overwhelmed. The story had become a monster, and they were all trapped in its belly. He needed to talk to Evelyn, to see her face, to know if the person he'd come to know was still in there, or if she had been fully reabsorbed by the world of Thorne. He drove to the Oaks. The gatehouse attendant, recognizing him from the news, let him through with a wary look. Evelyn was in the garden. She looked exhausted, but her eyes were clear. "I'm sorry," they both said at the same time, then let out a strained, tired laugh. "Your husband plays hardball," Marcus said. "He's protecting an asset. I finally realized I'm not an asset, I'm a person, and so are you." She took a deep breath. "I'm not giving him the statement. I don't know what that means for anything, but I'm not doing it." "It means he'll come after the loan harder," Marcus said. "And he'll win. I can't come up with that money." "I know." Evelyn looked at the ground, then back up, a new, fierce light in her eyes. "So we don't play his game. We change the game." She laid out a plan, born of desperation and a newfound understanding of her own privilege. She couldn't access their joint capital without Robert's sign-off, but she had something else: her name, her story, and a platform she'd never wanted. If the world was already watching, they would watch the real story. "I'm going to give an interview," she said. "Not a statement, a real one. I'm going to talk about affluent isolation, about the notes, about my terrible contract, about our talks. And I'm going to announce that I am personally guaranteeing your loan not as a wife but as an individual using the proceeds from a trust fund I control from before my marriage. It's my money. He can't touch it." Marcus was stunned. "You do that after all this?" "I should have done it that way from the start," she said. "I was trying to buy friendship. Now I'm just trying to be fair. And maybe show other people in my gilded cages that it's okay to reach for something real, even if it's messy." The interview was arranged with the same journalist who broke the story. It was a calculated risk. It could backfire spectacularly, painting her as unstable or making her a permanent social pariah. Robert, when he found out, sent one final text: "Do this, and you choose a path I cannot follow." It was the final, clean ultimatum: the life she knew or the terrifying possibility of an authentic one. Sitting in the makeup chair before the camera lights, Evelyn Thorne finally understood the stakes. This wasn't about saving Marcus's shop anymore. This was about declaring that her own heart had a value that wasn't on her husband's balance sheet. The bridge wasn't just between her and Marcus anymore. It was a bridge out of her own cage. And she was ready to walk across it, no matter what waited on the other side. The interview aired on a Sunday morning, a time slot usually reserved for political talk shows and feel-good segments. Evelyn Thorne, under the bright lights, did not look like a victim or a scandalous socialite. She looked calm, resolved, and profoundly tired. She answered every question without evasion. She spoke about the silence of the mansion, the affluent isolation that therapists had diagnosed, and the 2-year stream of yellow notes that had been her only tether to simple human warmth. She admitted to the first, terrible contract, calling it a gross miscalculation born of a poverty of connection. She described the real apology, the loan for the print shop, and the weekly conversations that had become her re-education in what it means to be a person. And then, looking directly into the camera, she confirmed she was using her separate premarital trust to guarantee the loan Marcus Williams had received. "It was never my husband's money," she said. "It was mine, and I am choosing to honor my word." The host asked the inevitable question. "This has clearly caused a rift in your marriage. What is the future for you and Robert Thorne?" Evelyn paused, choosing her words with care. "My husband is a man who values order, control, and certain kinds of strength. I have come to value different things: authenticity, vulnerability, the messy, risky business of real human connection. I don't know if those two value systems can coexist in one marriage. That is a private matter we will need to resolve. But what I do know is that I will no longer allow the fear of scandal to dictate who I am allowed to see, or to punish someone for the crime of being kind to me." The impact was immediate and bifurcated. In the world of corporate finance and high society, it was a seismic shock. Evelyn was instantly, irrevocably difficult. Dinner party invitations evaporated. Robert Thorne, through his lawyers, began the process of a separation. The marriage, as a public partnership, was over. But in the wider world, the reaction was dramatically different. The story was no longer a salacious tabloid tease. It was a raw, relatable case study in loneliness across the economic spectrum. Mental health professionals cited it in discussions about social connection. The Noteback movement gained new momentum, evolving into a broader campaign called See the Human, encouraging people to acknowledge service workers by name. For Marcus, the practical effects were swift. With the loan secured by Evelyn's trust, the legal threat vanished. His delivery company, facing public pressure, reinstated him with back pay and issued a generic statement supporting employee camaraderie. But Marcus knew his days in the uniform were numbered. The shop was no longer a distant dream. It was a project with a deadline. He and Evelyn's weekly meetings continued, but the dynamic had shifted irrevocably. They were no longer a lonely heiress and a struggling driver. They were co-conspirators who had survived a public storm. The conversations lost their stilted, diplomatic quality. They argued about business plans, debated design choices for the shop, and laughed about the absurdity of their situation. Evelyn, leveraging her now notorious name and her art history background, became his silent partner and de facto marketing director. She connected him with a retired printer looking to sell his equipment, negotiated a lease on a small storefront in a transitioning neighborhood, and helped design the brand, Cornerstone Print and Design. The tagline was her idea: messages that matter. The shop opened 8 months after the interview. The opening day was a local event. People came not just for the novelty, but for the story it represented, a story of kindness that refused to be crushed. Evelyn attended, not as a billionaire's wife, but as an investor in jeans and a sweater, blending into the crowd. Marcus's mother, Gloria, hugged her fiercely. His sister, Zoe, now a college freshman thanks to a scholarship fund that had mysteriously appeared, manned the register. But the most surprising guest was Robert Thorne. He arrived alone in an unassuming car and stood at the back of the shop for 10 minutes observing. He didn't approach Evelyn. He did, however, approach Marcus. The two men stood in the corner, surrounded by the smell of fresh ink and paper. "I underestimated you," Robert said, his voice low. "I assessed you as a risk variable. I was incorrect. You were a catalyst." "I didn't mean to be," Marcus replied, guarded. "Intent is irrelevant. Effect is what matters. The effect is that my wife is a different person, a more actualized person. It is a disruption I did not want, but it is not objectively a negative outcome." He paused as if the words were physically difficult. "The loan guarantee from her trust is sound. You will not be interfered with. Consider your enterprise a separate entity from our personal matters." It was not an apology. It was a corporate non-aggression pact. But for Robert Thorne, it was a monumental concession. He nodded once, then left as quietly as he had arrived. The gilded cage had not opened. Evelyn had simply walked out of it, and the warden had, finally, stopped trying to drag her back in. Life recalibrated. Marcus's shop found its footing, serving local artists, activists, and small businesses. He still wrote notes, on receipts, on sample prints, on packaging. The habit was in his bones. Evelyn, navigating the complicated process of separation, moved into a modest loft apartment downtown. She began volunteering at a community arts center, teaching a class on art history for seniors. For the first time, her conversations were not about deals or social positioning, but about color and light, and what paintings made people feel. She and Marcus settled into a rhythm. They spoke several times a week, sometimes about business, sometimes about nothing. The transactional ghost of the first contract was gone, replaced by a deep, platonic loyalty forged in fire. They had seen the worst of each other's worlds, the dehumanizing grind of the gig economy and the soul-crushing isolation of extreme wealth, and had chosen repeatedly to see the person behind the circumstance. A year to the day after the infamous contract offer, Evelyn received a package at her new apartment. It was from Cornerstone Print and Design. Inside was a simple, beautifully bound book. On the cover, embossed in gold foil, were the words, "The Notes." She opened it. Inside, Marcus had reprinted every single note he had ever written to her. "Have a great day. You've got this. Hope you're staying warm and dry." They were laid out in chronological order, a 2-year archive of micro-kindness. On the final page, he had written a new note, not on a sticky square, but on the rich, thick paper of the book. "Evelyn," it read, "you asked me once if kindness could be bought. I said no. But I've learned it can be repaid, not with money, but with attention, with courage, with showing up. You paid back every one of these notes 1,000 times over when you stepped into the light and told the truth. Thank you for seeing the human in me. It helped me remember the human in you. Your friend, Marcus." Evelyn sat on the floor of her unpacked apartment and cried. Not the desperate tears of loneliness, but the cleansing tears of being truly, fully seen. The story of the delivery driver and the billionaire's wife didn't have a fairy tale ending. They didn't fall in love. They didn't become business titans. They did something more ordinary and more radical. They built a bridge, and then they both crossed it, leaving their old isolated shores behind. Marcus found his purpose in community. Evelyn found her identity outside of a marriage contract. And the ripples continued. Inspired by their story, a consortium of mental health charities and Silicon Valley investors, some of whom had privately confided in Evelyn about their own loneliness, launched the Connection Benchmark Initiative. The goal was not to fund more apps, but to create grants for real-world projects that fostered non-transactional human interaction across social strata. The first pilot program funded community gardens, where corporate executives worked alongside retirees and college students. The second created a skill swap network in a major city, divorcing the exchange of knowledge from the exchange of money. The final surprising detail emerged quietly. A year after the shop opened, a national logistics company, facing a crisis of driver retention and public image, announced a new policy. Called the Human Connection Protocol. It was simple. It allocated each driver 15 minutes of paid time per week to perform a small, non-delivery act of kindness on their route if they chose to. Helping someone carry groceries, writing a note. It was a tiny, corporate-sanctioned window for humanity. The policy was ridiculed by some analysts as sentimental, but the internal data later leaked showed a measurable drop in driver turnover and a spike in customer satisfaction in the test markets. The business case for kindness, it turned out, was real. Marcus Williams and Evelyn Thorne had started with a sticky note and a catastrophic misunderstanding. They ended by proving, in a small but significant way, that the most bankrupting poverty is not a lack of money, but a lack of real connection, and that the richest reward is not a sum in a bank account, but the courage to be genuine with another person. Their bridge stood, and because it stood, others began to build their own. So what is the real currency of human connection? This story began with a transaction, a $10 million contract for kindness, and ended with its utter demolition. Because Marcus and Evelyn discovered something we all sense but often forget. The most valuable exchanges in life cannot be contracted, tracked, or priced. They can only be given freely and received with an open hand. Their journey mapped the two most common forms of modern poverty, not just the poverty of resources, which is visible and documented, but the poverty of connection, which is often invisible, dressed in wealth, and just as devastating. Evelyn had every material asset and no genuine companionship. Marcus had a wealth of human spirit, but was trapped in an economic system designed to exhaust it. They met in the no man's land between those two worlds, and in seeing each other clearly, they found a way out. This is not a story about a rescue. It is a story about a mutual awakening. The sticky note was the spark. The courage to be vulnerable from both of them was the fuel. The bridge they built wasn't made of money or grand gestures, but of weekly conversations, brutal honesty, and the stubborn decision to treat each other as complex human beings, not archetypes. The science we explored earlier is clear. Loneliness is a health crisis. Kindness is an intervention. Acts of connection release the very neurotransmitters that combat depression and anxiety. What Marcus and Evelyn proved in their messy, public way is that these aren't just personal truths. They are social imperatives. When we design systems, whether corporate logistics or high society marriages, that strip away the possibility for genuine, non-transactional interaction, we are building machines that make people sick. The lingering question their story leaves us with is this: in your own life, where are the walls? Where are the invisible contracts, the unspoken rules, the delivery routes of habit that keep you isolated from a genuine, risky human exchange? It might not be a mansion or a delivery van. It might be an office, a social circle, a family dynamic, or simply the pace of your own life. The invitation is to look for the bridge, to be the person who writes the note even if it feels small, to be the person who, when you receive an unexpected kindness, sees the human behind it, not just the service. To understand that the greatest privilege and the greatest poverty can exist in the same house, on the same street, in the same human heart. If this story resonated with you, We invite you to become part of this conversation. Subscribe to our channel for more deep dives into the human stories behind the headlines, the psychology of connection, and the quiet forces that shape our lives. Each new video is crafted to bring you meaningful perspective. We would truly love to hear from you. How did this story make you feel? Have you ever experienced a moment when a small, unexpected kindness changed the trajectory of your day or even your life? Or have you been the one to offer it? Share your story in the comments below. Let's build a community that values these connections. Thank you for spending this time with us. We wish you and your loved ones not just success, but authenticity. Not just comfort, but courageous connection. Remember, the next bridge begins with a single, simple choice: to see the human in front of you and to let them see you in return. We'll see you in the next story.